It's Brian Preston, the money guy.
Okay, so the first S that we think you should master is safety. When you want to prepare for the next downturn, you want to master safety. The second S that you have to master if you want to be prepared for the next pending downturn, whenever it comes, is self-control.
Yeah, this is the behavioral stuff because we are our own worst enemy. I think that a lot of us, we see the S&P 500 rate of return and we go, man, wealth creation ought to be extremely simple.
Super easy.
I mean, just go buy, an index fund. It'll be great. And we talk about that all the time. You're like, well, but why does the behavior of the typical investor never reflect what you see in the rates of returns historically of the S&P 500 and most index funds? And the reason is this, the self-control and the cycle of market emotions.
That's right. Whenever it comes to investing, it's no surprise if we know that fear and greed are two emotions that all of us are impacted by. Why would the epitome of fear and the epitome of greed not come out when it comes to how we feel emotionally about the ups and downs of the overall stock market?
Well, look, I mean, because I like to point out a few points here because we are at an all-time high with the financial markets right now, and that is we put a few quotes in there. Wow, I'm smart.
That's the person who just, they came through 2020 and they're at the cocktail party and you know what? They got them a little bit at the GameStop and they got some of that Bitcoin and they've done really, really well. And they're thinking, boy, I've got this wealth building thing figured out.
And that's why we have the word euphoria written in green is because you're thinking, you know what? I'm going to keep rocking and rolling. This is the maximum point of financial risk is because, look, things could get ugly. And then we see when we come down the cycle of market emotions, meaning that this will go through a cycle we know twice every decade historically. You start seeing anxiety, fear, depression, panic, and then the one I see in red there is capitulation. This is when people
they just throw their
stock
hands
market. I'm just out of this thing. And this is, like I said, this is the journey that turns that beautiful stat that the financial markets make about 10% a year through history into a much harder objective because people give up. They go through that capitulation. They go, you know what? I know it's never happened before, but I'm getting the heck out of this thing. I'm just tired of losing. I've already lost 25%. There's no way I'm going to let this thing go down 50%. I'm getting the heck out right now. What's so sad, and this is why you have to be a contrarian if you're going to be a long-term investor, that's actually the maximum point of opportunity typically. When everybody's headed for the exits, that's actually when you should be looking for the opportunities because guess what? The process repeats itself and goes all over. Now, what I think is interesting because when Daniel designed this, it actually looks like when the cycle repeats itself, it's a little bit lower than where it started.
It even looks, when I look at this, it looks even, Charles will correct me on this, but I think this is like if you were to graph a logarithmic scale, I think this is what it does, but it looks like a bell curve right side up and then an upside down bell curve and then a right side bell curve. It just looks very symmetric, right? But I don't think that's the way that the market actually works.
No, so we took a snapshot of the last few years. And here's what's interesting. If you look at the S&P 500 from 2018 to 2020, because there's a lot to unpack there. I mean, we got a pandemic built into it. You can see, look, in 2018 going into 2019, there was a drop in the marketplace. You see the kids falling off the cliff. They go, got their hands raised. They're all ready to go through the cycle like they're on a roller coaster. But notice it hit the V-shaped recovery, went up, and then we hit right around March of 2020. We fell off a cliff. The kids once again have their hands up. They're ready to go on the roller coaster ride down. You look at this, you go, God, so much volatility in such a short period of time. Why would I want to put myself into that emotionally if I didn't have to? Well, we wanted to go pan this out a little further because here's what we always talk to you guys about. And I feel like we ought to have the yodeling music in the background is because this is when you invest in the long term, you're actually walking up a mountain with a yo-yo, meaning that you are throwing that yo-yo up and down. So in the short term, it is going up and down. But you are walking ever further into higher and higher elevation so that when you look at the chart, instead of looking at it for 2 years, let's look at it for 20 years. Let's blow this thing out tenfold. And you can see those blips that we had in 2018 and 2020 look so tiny. And you can see even we have 2008 on there. notice we are in higher elevation if you just give it enough time so that you don't let your emotions derail you from this long-term prosperity that us as humans are creating.
We titled this show on purpose, what to do in the markets at an all-time high. Because if you think about this chart, when you're standing at the peak, it's scary if you're looking over the edge. It's scary if you're thinking, oh man, there's a long way down I could fall. But when you zoom out and look at the mountain range of wealth that you have been scaling, even those low points, even those freak out fourth quarter 2018, 2020 pandemic downturns, even those low points are higher than where you were 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. So much so that if you think the market is high right now, wait till we see it 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now. If you can have that perspective, you will be ready to weather whatever the market throws at you in the near to intermediate term.
And we're going to have even more on that a little bit later, so stay tuned because we're going to show you, even if you're the worst investor in history, there's a lot of opportunity out there. But I want to kind of shift to that third S. It's like,
guys, hold on, you forgot. You forgot the Oracle. You forgot the Oracle.
How do I forget what the Oracle from Omaha, Warren Buffett? Guys, I know y'all probably get tired of us sharing this quote because it's a powerful one. I'll just read it to you. Be fearful when others are greedy. Be greedy when others are fearful. Yep. Remember how I was earlier telling you that when everybody's headed towards the exits, you ought to be looking to see if that's the maximum financial opportunity point? That's exactly what Warren is talking about. Here's what's so interesting. Every few years, whenever we go through a market downturn, Warren changes this saying up. He'll say, hey, when it's raining opportunity, don't be out there with a thimble. Be out there with a bucket or wash tub. I mean, he changes this around constantly. Or if you have you own a farm, you have a crazy neighbor who's yelling out prices every day, sell on the days that they're way overpaying, buy their farm from them when they're under, when they don't know what they have and what it's worth. This is all on the same tree of opportunity that Uncle Warren is talking about. Just pay attention to this. It's pretty timeless. Doesn't matter what cycle we're in the market. This is timeless advice that will serve you well.
Now, what we don't want you to do is misinterpret this advice. Be greedy or be fearful when others are greedy, and be greedy when others are fearful. Meaning that you should have tectonic shifts in what you're doing, because that is a perfect segue into the third S. If you want to master preparing your portfolio for the next downturn, not only do you have safety under control, and not only do you have to master self-control, you have to also understand your strategy.